I call the member Denise Roche.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker. Tēnā koe te whare. Rau rangatira mā tēnei te mihi ki a koutou I runga I te kaupapa o te rā. Tēnā koutou nā rangatira, nā tangata o te Kawerau a Maki. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Mr Speaker, I rise to speak to support the Kawerau a Maki Claims Settlement Bill that is before the House. Firstly, let me acknowledge all those who've been involved in the negotiation and settlement process of the bill before us today. I recognise that this bill is the culmination of hours and hours and hours of work. To the people of Te Kawerau Maki, I pay tribute to them and to their kaumātua and kuia who've passed, who over many, many years have been involved in these claims and have brought these claims to the House today. I also want to pay tribute and acknowledge Eru Thompson, who have joined his ancestors along the way. Mr Speaker, I acknowledge the deep feelings and loss that these iwi have suffered as a result of the wrongs that have been done to them by the Crown. I pay tribute to all those who have persisted in bringing this bill to the House in their quest for justice. And they've done that over many generations. The Greens stand on a charter that recognises Te Tiriti o Waitangi as the founding document of this land, of Aotearoa. And one of our core principles is around honouring and protecting the environment, and another is a firm dedication to fairness and to peace and to justice. And this bill, sir, fits within our founding principles. Firstly, sir, I want to acknowledge the generosity, and when I'm looking at this bill, at the settlement bill, I want to acknowledge the generosity of Te Kawerau a Maki. In the synopsis of the settlement deed that was written by the Office of the Treaty Settlements, it says, and I quote, "The Crown acknowledges that for too long it failed to appropriately respond to Kawerau a Maki's claims for redress and justice. The apology that's in the settlement deed and in the bill itself records the Crown's profound regret for its breaches of the Treaty of Waitangi and its principles, which resulted in the alienation of much of Te Kawerau a Maki's land by 1856. And the Crown also expresses sorrow for its subsequent failure to protect lands that were reserved for Te Kawerau a Maki. Through the apology and settlement, the Crown seeks to atone for its wrong and lift the burden of grievance for Te Kawerau a Maki so the process of healing can begin." When I read the full acknowledged history, sir, it's apparent that time after time, going right back to just after the treaty was signed, the rangatira of Te Kawerau a Maki have attempted to utilise the legal processes that the Crown developed to protect and retain their interests. But inevitably, the power of the Crown has been stacked against them. And this includes through allowing the private sale of their lands without their involvement, and ignoring their shared customary ownership of large sections of land. And an example of that is the Crown's purchase in 1841 of the 110,000 acres area called Mahurangi and Omiha. In this documented case, the Crown dealt with other iwi on this purchase rather than Te Kawerau a Maki. And it wasn't really until about 1866 that their interests were recognised by the Native Land Court for their rights within the Mahurangi reserves, and in 1873 for their rights at Mangatawhiri and Tawharanui. Another example is the Crown's land purchases between 1848 and 1865 in the West Auckland and South Kaipara areas. And again from the settlement deed, it says that there is no evidence the Crown obtained Kawerau a Maki agreement in any of the 1848 negotiations for purchases of land in West Auckland and the Upper Waitemata Harbour area. No reserves were retained in association with these transactions, and the land alienated included kāinga that occupied by Te Kawerau Maki at Nihotupu, at Waikumete, and significant historic places such as Te Kotutangi, Kotuitanga and the Faux Portage, and Wahitapu at Pukeatua, Murio, Hikurangi and Titirangi. And it goes on and on and on. And I'm grateful that the settlement deeds are there as a historic record. There's no doubt that Te Kawerau Maki were deliberately and systematically alienated from their lands. It documents every, example after example of dodgy dealings by the Crown that Te Kawerau Maki have had to bear the consequences of. And these things include things like land areas being vastly underestimated, like the Hikurangi block, which was purchased by the Crown in 1853, that was estimated to be 12,000 acres and was later found to be 54,141 acres, sir. Other examples like the Crown purchasing prices being low, the losses of around 100,000 acres in their heartland of West Auckland were bought for the Crown for about £950, which works out to be about 2 shillings an acre. There's other examples like the Crown never keeping their side of the deal to ensure that there would be benefits for Te Kawerau Maki, for access to schools, for medical care, and for ongoing gratuities as a result of these land purchases. Those are only some of the examples, sir. And I guess these swindles, and that's I guess what we have to call them, were compounded by the inability for Te Kawerau Maki to get justice over the last 150 years or more. Te Kawerau Maki were not consulted about the creation of the Native Land Court. They were not represented in Parliament during the creation of the Native Lands Act in 1862 and 1865. Their overlapping interests with other iwi were not recognised in Native Land Court cases time and time again. And there was also the vesting of land into individuals by the Native Land Court, so breaking down the collective ownership of land, which of course makes it easier for iwi to be alienated from that whenua. And in the 1920s, land was appropriated by the Crown through the Public Works Act, and then of course through private sales, as well as the government acts that continued right through until the mid-1900s. The impact on the generations of Te Kawerau Maki has been severe. The alienation from their land means that they've suffered, and the settlement records the socio-economic impacts and outlines basically the history of their diaspora. And it goes into some detail about how that occurred in area after area, place after place throughout their marvellous rohe. When I look at the losses, sir, I'm astounded at the generosity of Te Kawerau Maki. There's no way on earth that this settlement will ever compensate them, and that's acknowledged in both the apology and the bill and in the deed of settlement. But the bill does include the Crown's apology, and we don't underestimate that as well. The settlement itself offers the apology, the cultural redress, the financial and commercial redress. But when you look at it, essentially it's only 9 sites being vested in the iwi, totalling 31 hectares. The financial redress of $6.5 million, sir, and $300,000 towards establishing a marae, a living marae for these iwi, which is a really big start in their future healing and economic development too, sir. But while we acknowledge the journey that it's taken to get this bill to this House, we do, as Greens, have to state for the record that we do never believe that these treaty bills are full and final settlements, sir. We can't acknowledge that they are because they're not full settlements, and they're not final because we don't know now how the impact of those historical grievances from before 1992 will impact on future generations. And sir, when you consider that this government bailed out Southern Finance and paid them far, far more than this iwi have received in their settlement, then we see that there is still unfairness occurring. But we, having said that, agreed that this is a time to celebrate the settlement and a future progress towards healing for these iwi. So we commend this bill to the House. We look forward to hearing more about the issues during the Select Committee process, and we will be supporting the bill. Tēnā koutou katoa.
Mr. Speaker.